green paper, and or their even more abstract derivatives and so on, large sheets of paper supposedly covering huge masses of money, are going to get really upset. And we're going to have basically a resource battle at the same time that certain geopolitical moves are made by idiot governments.
Well, and that kind of goes along with, if anyone's kind of listening to the news reports, there's all this conversation, underlying kind of conversation about potential war with different peoples. That's in the works now. I mean, you can, if you're watching the news or listening to the news or even read it, you can see that there is a buildup of tensions everywhere. It's just a matter of who's going to break it out first.
It sure seems that way, yeah.
It does, and it's, hopefully we can change all that. I do believe there's a power to change all that. But that being said, we're talking about your reports, and this is what the reports are saying. And we're going to come back to that date, by the way, October 26th, in regards to a question from the audience when we come back in the second hour.
Okay.
And because it's kind of goes along with that whole timing space that we were just talking about, October 26th. And then, of course, I think it was in Report 5 that we also talked about the armies. If you can remember that, so you might want to tie that in with this, if you would, Cliff.
Well, within the this is all tied in with a very large archetype, which is the U.S. military, and we had that same data set situation that I just described again from Part 5 to Part 6 relative to the armies, because Army is an archetype for military in general. If you look at how people use words, they don't necessarily, nowadays we might be very specific, but in the past, people just went and joined the Army, regardless of what branch of service it might have been. And at an archetype level, going back into classic literature, they didn't really differentiate. They had naval forces and so on, but they were all part of the general army of the country. In any event, though, we've got a situation here where the combined twin disasters of a collapsing currency up to the borders of the U.S. In other words, the dollar's going to collapse as the global reserve currency, and that's going to have horrific effects on us because we will have to figure out something to use to buy real currency in order to buy real goods from abroad, because no one's going to take the worthless green paper anymore. Our words actually come down to rejected by all. However, we may still use the dollar within the U.S. I mean, that's yet to be determined, or we just don't see a clear conclusion on that. But that's going to impact the Army with the ability to pay for things, including such things as, later on, the transportation of people back from military bases all over the planet. Because as war situations develop, there's a whole lot of countries that just aren't going to want to have a military base in their area. The reason being that it's a quite obvious target. And why live next to a target if everybody can just get together and say, all you Americans, go home?
Right. Yeah. Would be a good thing, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm, being a military brat and having lived in that system for 17 solid years and seen the planet from that viewpoint, it'd be a very good thing.
Wow. I didn't realize that you had that in your background, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and, I think this might be a good time for me just to interject here that hopefully here in the next month or so, we're going to have you back on, just you. And it's not going to be about Alta Reports, but it's going to be about Cliff High, and I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
As much as you can twist my arm to get out of me. Yeah.
I will. I'll twist it. I promise.
Okay.
All right. So, any more to be said then on the populace of USA that you think is important for us to share tonight?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are going to be noteworthy, and that is that the disease of anti-press is going to spread to our country as well.
Sure.
And we're going to have a situation where the topsy-turviness of the world will be illustrated by the press from the powers that be, in that they're going to have to look for good news, and they're going to have to look real hard over the course of summer. And what they're going to tend to focus on are all of these alternative groups doing alternative kind of things. And they're actually going to end up undermining their own position with the very linguistics that they're putting out around the planet. And it'll be a situation of here they are trying to support their authoritarian masters at the same time showing that anybody having any success doing anything this summer is doing it out of the box and away from the corporate fascist world.
And it does work for a lot of people.
It sure does,
And,
and it'll have to work for everyone because that world is currently dying.
Yes, it is. And again, that gets back to right in the very beginning. We talked about that the universe is pushing people around, and if you're losing your job, it's asking you to look like, perhaps look in different directions in order to sustain your life and to carry on.
Right.
It's just the way that's the way the energies are running.
Right, and it's actually, it's a lot harder to have to go out and think for yourself as opposed to just nodding your head and saying, "Yeah, boss, I'll go do that."
Well, I think people are now questioning that "yeah, boss" sometimes doesn't work very well because "yeah, boss" is
sure ends up with where you're out of work, right?
Yeah, there is no loyalty, you
Yeah.
see, and I think people are really waking up to that. And if they haven't, they will.
Yes, I suspect that the unemployment situation, again, there's another aspect of the duality that we see coming in through the Populous USA entity, and that is that the reason that the press is out running around desperately looking for good news stories is because the bad news stories are starting to pile up to the point where even they're going to have a hard time putting a spin on them because the unemployment rates are going to, in the process of, now it's all interconnected, so let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
As the dollar collapses, the federal government's going to do this review, if you will, this revision process, and start lopping off chunks of itself that it just isn't able to pay for anymore, old obsolete programs and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Different entitlement groups that there's so few people left to be entitled that the ones who get screwed in it either have no power or are so non-numerous as to not be a problem. Now, when they do this, there's going to be a bunch of unintended side effects. Some of those unintended consequences are going to include, according to our data, subcontractors and direct government employees who are going to be thrown out of work with no real the possibility of finding other jobs and are going to have to turn to doing something to make a living. And some of them are going to say, I know all these secrets. Now, how can I make money selling what I know in terms of secrets because I worked for the government for X number of years? And so that's going to cause other problems relative to the good news, bad news situation, because when these people come on out, some of the first things they're going to come out and say is that the government's been lying about all these numbers that are coming out, which we all know, which we all acknowledge. The Bureau, BLS, Bureau of Lying Statisticians.
That's right.
Okay, and the unemployment number is not whatever they're claiming. It's probably 2 to 3 times as high as that.
Sure.
And if you actually looked at it and were accurate about it in terms of people that can't find work, you'd be staggered because you'd find that perhaps if you looked at the demographics, perhaps any male over 50, if he loses his job, that's it. He'll never find another one. So the numbers are being totally skewed, but the government's about to lop off chunks of themselves that will then open up this floodgate of whistleblowers, and we'll start hearing about this. And so again, we get back into the self-compounding duality issue.
Yep, and it's going to continue, and I think the more that we educate people, and these, your reports have shown, and the more this information gets out, the better it is, so that people can really be prepared. And I just think the knowledge is what's most important here. Right.
But we're running, as we say, we're racing time.
We are.
That's one of our issues, is the immediacy data is piling up.
Yes.
And,
as is all the other things, right?
Yep.
Let's jump forward to the Space Goats fart.
Sure.
Farts. Still love your names that you have these things. It's just, what an imagination. Love it. So tell us what's going on with that in this last series here.
Well, in part 6, again we get a link back to this whole coagulation, is what we called it, the coagulation or condensation or tightening of the federal government into a thick syrupy mass, and little bits and pieces of it being thrown away, and that's going to again cause people to want to be whistleblowers, and a huge chunk of these guys that are going to come out as whistleblowers are going to be of the technical class that were casually brushed off in this downsizing, and they don't have anywhere to go, and so on. It'll take a while after they've lost their job and burned through their unemployment before they start thrashing around and saying, maybe I'd better contact this tabloid and tell them for the last 15 years my job has been to airbrush photos for NASA. And boy, can I show you this stuff, and oh yeah, I managed to get a few negatives out, and this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that That wave of whistleblowers is within our unknown and officially denied subset of data, which we labeled space goat farts.
Right.
And it shows that we're going to get into a very serious level of increase of discussion